This is an ancient Japanese fairy tale called Green Willow, and it was handed down by word of mouth over the centuries. This is the story of a samurai who sets out on an adventure for his lord, the Daimyo, but refuses to follow his advice. And the story ends enigmatically and is open to interpretation. My good friend from Japan has explained the meaning of this fairy tale, and it's really, really interesting, and I've put it at the end of this recording. Tomodata, the young samurai, owed allegiance to the Lord of Noto. He was a soldier, a courtier, and a poet. He had a sweet voice and a beautiful face, a noble form, and a winning address. He was a graceful dancer and excelled in every manly sport. He was wealthy and generous and kind. He was beloved by rich and by poor. Now, his daimyo, the lord of Noto, wanted a man to undertake a mission of trust. A daimyo is a lord who is a vassal of the shogun. He chose Tomodata and called him to his presence. "Are you loyal?" said the daimyo. "My lord, you know it," answered Tomodata. "Do you love me then?" asked the daimyo. "Aye, my good lord," Tomodata, kneeling before him. "Then carry my message," said the daimyo. "Ride and do not spare your beast. Ride straight, and fear not the mountains or the enemy's country. Stay not for storm nor any other thing. Lose your life, but betray not your trust. Above all, do not look at any maid between the eyes. Ride and bring me the word again quickly." Thus spoke the Lord of Noto. So Tomodata got him to his horse, and away he rode upon his quest. Obedient to his lord's commands, he spared not his good beast. He rode straight, and was not afraid of the steep mountain passes, nor of the enemy's country. Ere he had been 3 days upon the road, the autumn tempest burst, for it was the 9th moon. Down poured the rain in a torrent. The wind howled in the pine tree branches. It blew a typhoon. The good horse trembled and could scarcely keep on its feet, but Tomodata spoke to it and urged it on. His own cloak he drew close about him and held it so that it might not blow away, and in this wise he rode on. The fierce storm swept away many a familiar landmark of the road, and buffeted the samurai so that he became weary almost to fainting. Noontide was dark as twilight. Twilight was dark as night, and when night fell it was black as the night of Yomi, where the lost souls wander and cry. At this time Tomodata had lost his way in a wild, lonely place, where as it seemed to him no human soul inhabited. His horse could carry him no longer, and he wandered on foot through bogs and marshes, through rocky and thorny tracks, until he fell into deep despair. "Alack," he cried, "must I die in this wilderness, and the quest of the Lord of Noto be unfulfilled?" At this moment the great winds blew away the clouds of the sky, so that the moon shone very brightly forth, and by the sudden light Tomodata saw a little hill on his right hand. Upon the hill was a small thatched cottage, and before the cottage grew 3 green weeping willow trees. "Now indeed the gods be thanked," said Tomodata, and he climbed the hill in no time. Light shone from the chinks of the cottage door, and smoke curled out of the hole in the roof. The green willow trees swayed and flung out their green streamers in the wind. Tomodatta threw his horse rein over a branch of one of them and called for admittance to the longed-for shelter. At once the cottage door was opened by an old woman, very poorly but neatly clad. "Who rides abroad upon such a night?" she asked, "and what wills he here?" "I am a weary traveller, lost and benighted upon your lonely moor. My name is Tomodatta. I am a samurai in the service of the Lord of Noto, upon whose business I ride. Show me hospitality for the love of the gods. I crave food and shelter for myself and my horse." As the young man stood speaking, the water streamed from his garments. He reeled a little and put out a hand to hold on by the side post of the door. Come in, young sir," cried the old woman, full of pity. "Come into the warm fire. You are very welcome. We have but coarse fare to offer, but it shall be set before you with great goodwill. As to your horse, I see you have delivered him to my daughter. He is in good hands." At this, Tomodatta turned sharply around. Just behind him in the dim light stood a very young girl, with the horse's rein thrown over her arm. Her garments were blown about, and her long loose hair streamed upon the wind. The samurai wondered how she had come there. Then the old woman drew him into the cottage and shut the door. Before the fire sat the good man of the house, and the two old people did the very best they could for Tomodatta. They gave him dry garments, comforted him with hot rice wine, and quickly prepared a good supper for him. Presently, the daughter of the house came in, and retired behind a screen to comb her hair and to dress afresh. Then she came forth to wait upon him. She wore a blue robe of homespun cotton. Her feet were bare. Her hair was not tied nor confined in any way, but lay along her smooth cheeks and hung straight and long and black to her very knees. She was slender and graceful. Tomodatta judged her to be about 15 years old, and knew well that she was the fairest maiden he had ever seen. At length, she knelt at his side to pour wine into his cup. She held the wine bottle in two hands and bent her head. Tomodatta turned to look at her. When she had made an end of pouring the wine and had set down the bottle, their glances met, and Tomodatta looked at her full between the eyes, for he forgot altogether the warning of his Daimyo, the Lord of Noto. "Maiden," he said, "what is your name?" She answered, "They call me the Green Willow." "The dearest name on earth," he said, and looked at her between the eyes again. And because he looked so long, her face grew rosy red from chin to forehead, and though she smiled, her eyes filled with tears. Ah me, for the Lord of Noto's quest! Then Tomodatta made this little song. "Long-haired maiden, do you know that with the red dawn I must go? Do you wish for me far away? Cruel long-haired maiden, say. Long-haired maiden, if you know that with the red dawn I must go, why, oh why, do you blush so?" And the maiden, the Green Willow, answered, "The dawn comes if I will or no. Never leave me, never go. My sleeve shall hide the blush away. The dawn comes if I will or no. Never leave me, never go. Lord, I lift my long sleeve so." Oh, Green Willow, sighed Tomodata. That night he lay before the fire still, but with wide eyes, for no sleep came to him, though he was weary. He was sick for love of the green willow, yet by the rules of his service he was bound in honor to thinking of no such thing. Moreover, he had the quest of Lord of Noto that lay heavy on his heart, and he longed to keep truth and loyalty. At the first peep of day he rose up. He looked upon the kind old man who had been his host, and left a purse of gold at his side as he slept. The maiden and her mother lay behind the screen. Tomodata saddled and bridled his horse, and mounting, rode slowly away through the mist of the early morning. The storm was quite over, and it was still as paradise. The green grass and its leaves shone with the wet. The sky was clear, and the path was very bright with the autumn flowers. But Tomodata was sad. When the sunlight streamed across his saddle bow, "Ah, Green Willow, he sighed. And at noontide it was Green Willow, and Green Willow, when the twilight fell. That night he lay in a deserted shrine, and the place was so holy that in spite of all he slept from midnight till the dawn. Then he rose, having it in his mind to wash himself in a cold stream that flowed nearby, so as to go refreshed upon his journey. But he was stopped upon the shrine's threshold. There lay the green willow, prone upon the ground. A slender thing she lay, face downwards, with her black hair flung about her. She lifted a hand and held Tomodata by the sleeve. My lord, she said, and fell to sobbing piteously. He took her in his arms without a word, and soon he set her on his horse before him, and together they rode the livelong day, all the livelong day. It was little they recked of the road they went, for all the while they looked into each other's eyes. The heat and the cold were nothing to them. They felt not the sun nor the rain. Of the truth of falsehood that they thought nothing about at all, nor of filial piety, nor of the Lord of Noto's quest, nor of honor nor plighted word. They knew but one thing. Alas for the ways of love! At last, they came to an unknown city where they stayed. Tomodata carried gold and jewels in his girdle. So they found a house built of white wood, spread with sweet white mats. In every dim room there could be heard the sound of the garden waterfall, whilst the swallow flitted across and across the paper lattice. Here they dwelt, knowing but one thing. Here they dwelt 3 years of happy days, and for Tomodata and the green willow, the years were like garlands of sweet flowers. This must be a Japanese house with swallows painted on the paper. The lattice is sort of the dividers between the rooms. In the autumn of the 3rd year, it chanced that the two of them went forth into the garden at dusk, for they had a wish to see the round moon rise, and as they watched, the green willow began to shake and shiver. My dear, said Tomodata, you shake and shiver, and it is no wonder. The night wind is chill. Come in. And he put his arm around her. At this she gave a long and pitiful cry, very loud and full of agony, and when she had uttered the cry, she failed and dropped her head upon her love's breast. "Tomodata," she whispered, "say a prayer for me. I die." "Oh, say not so, my sweet, my sweet. You are but weary, you are faint." He carried her to the stream's side, where the irises grew like swords, and the lotus leaves like shields, and laved her forehead in the water. He said, "What is it, my dear? Look up and live." "The tree," she moaned, "the tree, they have cut down my tree. Remember the green willow." With that she slipped, as it seemed, from his arms to his feet, and he, casting himself upon the ground, found only silken garments, bright-colored, warm and sweet, and straw sandals, scarlet-thronged. In the after years, when Tomodata was a holy man, he travelled from shrine to shrine painfully upon his feet, and acquired much merit. Once, at nightfall, he found himself upon a lonely moor. On his right hand he beheld a little hill, and on it the sad ruins of a poor thatched cottage. The door swung to and fro with the broken latch and creaking hinge. Before it stood 3 old stumps of willow trees that had long since been cut down. Tomodata stood for a long time, still and silent. Then he sang gently to himself. "Long-haired maiden, do you know that with the red dawn I must go? Do you wish me far away? Cruel long-haired maiden, say. Long-haired maiden, if you know that with the red dawn I must go, why, oh why, do you blush so? Ah, foolish song, the gods forgive me. I should have recited the Holy Sutra for the dead," said Tomodata. Thank you for listening. So my Japanese friend has explained that she thinks her interpretation is that the samurai ended unhappy because he was not loyal to his shogun. The shogun trusted him, but the samurai betrayed him even though he pledged his allegiance. He overcame all the difficulties on the way of his adventure until the last one, which he couldn't overcome, which was the girl. In Japan, the green willow represents ghosts. So when we hear some old tales about ghosts, they're green willows most of the time. The girl said her name was Green Willow. We imagine she could be a ghost who was not able to enter into nirvana yet. That's why the samurai said at the last something like he should have recited the sutras for the girl. So had he read the sutras, she would have gone to nirvana. If the samurai left her in order to follow the shogun's advice, that's not really advice, this is the mission. The samurai could live happily ever after, and the girl could also enter nirvana at last. Usually ghosts in a kimono have their hair down, and male ghosts too, so the hair will be hanging down, I think like we saw in The Ring. So yeah, there we are. Be aware as you move as to where the willow trees are. I want to give you a little bit of background into fairy tales, Shinto, and Japanese culture. It will give us a deeper understanding of not only this fairy tale, but definitely of Japan. We noticed in the story that Tomodatsa passed through a place called Komi, which is really called Yomi, which is the underworld that souls inhabit. Now this is connected to a vast range of Japanese mythology, but we'll just give you a little overview here. The ideas from the earliest Shinto writings in Japan from the year 641. This writing is called the Kojiki, or records of ancient happenings, or literally old things records. This includes hymns, myths, chants, fairy tales handed down, real stories, all kinds of things. They're just recording history. So the Kojiki also records the origins of life in Japan, so the spirits, the gods, and the imperial lineage. Now, once someone has entered Yomi, as Tomodatta did, it's nearly impossible to return. It's not hell, but it's a place where many people go in order to wander gloomily for eternity. Now, I will talk a little bit about the heavens in Japan, and those are frequented by gods. And my understanding so far is that the underworld is for humans and the gods are in the heavens. So, now there is a physical boundary between this Yomi world of the dead and the real world, the physical world. It's said to be in Ifuyasaka in Izumo province, which is just a few hundred kilometers west of Kyoto on the North Beach facing the Sea of Japan, in a town called Higashizumo. So Higashi is west, and is a shrine called Kosen Hirazaka. Now there's also a massive stone there. Now the name Yomi is of an unknown origins in terms of pronunciation, but the characters mean yellow spring in Chinese. The Chinese believed that there was an underworld and a heaven, and the Japanese divided the spirit world into three: the land of Yomi, underground; Ashihara no Nakatsukuni, which is the central land of the reed plain. So I would imagine this is the parallel world between the physical and the spiritual. And Takamagahara, the heavens, which we just spoke of. Now in Shinto, at the time of the creation of the earth, the idea was that the light and pure elements branched off and became heaven, or Takamagahara, while the heavy elements became the earth. So that's a bit of background. We have a couple of interpretations here. One is that of the play. We have a couple interpretations of this fairy tale. One is that without honor, our life is meaningless. Or we could also say without honoring what the mission we have to do in life is, we have a meaningless life. Or without honor to our word, our life goes off in the wrong direction or is meaningless. And we can also think about not being distracted from your mission or your purpose. And if we do that, it leads to nowhere, really. I suppose you could say Tomodatta was in despair and he realized his mistake at the end. So yeah, that was the fairy tale. We'll do some more Japanese fairy tales in the future and see if we can connect them back to this myth origin, or origin myth. Thank you for listening.